Picture this. You're standing in front of your bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., toothbrush in hand, when it hits you like a cosmic slap to the face. That reflection staring back at you, it's not really you. It's a biological puppet show run by ancient chemical programs that couldn't care less about your Netflix preferences or your existential dread about Monday mornings. Your brain, that magnificent 3-pound universe between your ears, is desperately trying to convince you that you're the star of this show. But here's the plot twist that would make Christopher Nolan jealous. Evolution doesn't give a damn about making you happy, successful, or even remotely aware of what's actually going on. Right now, as you're processing these words, millions of years of evolutionary programming are firing off in patterns that your ancestors developed when their biggest worry was whether that rustling bush contained berries or something with very sharp teeth. Your fight or flight response, still calibrated for saber-toothed tigers, not your boss's passive-aggressive emails. We like to think we're the crown jewel of creation, the universe's masterpiece, the point where intelligence finally got its act together. But what if I told you that evolution is less like a master craftsman carefully sculpting David, and more like a drunk artist throwing paint at a canvas in the dark, and somehow, miraculously, occasionally hitting something that doesn't immediately die? The story you're about to hear will shatter every comfortable assumption you have about why you exist, why you do the things you do, and why that nagging voice in your head keeps telling you there's got to be more to life than this. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Evolution is the universe's most successful con artist, and we've all been beautifully, brilliantly fooled. We're going to journey through the looking glass of natural selection, where nothing is quite what it seems, where survival isn't about the fittest but the weirdest, and where the meaning of life might just be the biggest practical joke ever played on conscious beings. Along the way, you'll discover why peacocks are nature's equivalent of a midlife crisis, why your brain lies to you more than a politician during election season, and how a bunch of confused chemicals somehow convinced themselves they were you. So buckle up, because we're about to dive headfirst into the beautiful absurdity of existence itself. And if you find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about life, the universe, and your place in it, well, that's not a bug, that's a feature. Sometimes the most profound truths come wrapped in the most unsettling packages. The rabbit hole goes deeper than Alice ever imagined, and we're just getting started. But before we spiral into complete existential chaos, let's start with something that seems simple. How do we get here in the first place? Here's a fun fact that'll keep you up at night. You exist because a rock from space really wanted to ruin some dinosaurs' day about 66 million years ago. No, seriously. If that asteroid had decided to take a slight detour, maybe stop by Venus for some sightseeing, you'd be nothing more than a theoretical possibility, and some very smart velociraptor would probably be reading this instead. Evolution isn't the grand, purposeful design we pretend it is. It's more like the universe playing an endless game of cosmic roulette, where the ball is made of random mutations, and the wheel is spinning through geological time. The house always wins, except the house is entropy, and the jackpot is just not dying long enough to reproduce. Let's rewind to the very beginning, and I mean the very beginning. For billion years ago, Earth was basically a hellscape that would make Dante's Inferno look like a tropical vacation. Volcanic eruptions, toxic atmosphere, meteorites having target practice with the surface. Not exactly prime real estate, but somewhere in this chaos, a few ambitious molecules decided to play house. These weren't your sophisticated, college-educated molecules with 401k plans and sensible retirement strategies. These were basically chemical delinquents hanging out in primordial soup, accidentally bumping into each other, and occasionally forming something that didn't immediately fall apart. Think of it as the world's first, most dysfunctional chemistry set. The miracle, and I use that term loosely, is that some of these molecular accidents discover the ultimate life hack, making copies of themselves. Not because they had dreams and aspirations, mind you. They just stumbled onto replication the way you stumble onto a good Netflix series at 2 a.m. when you should be sleeping. Now here's where it gets philosophically twisted. These early replicators weren't trying to evolve. They weren't sitting around having existential discussions about their purpose in the universe. They were just doing what they do, copying themselves with all the enthusiasm of a broken copy machine. Some copies came out perfect, some came out wonky, and some came out so weird that they accidentally worked better than the original. The wonky ones that worked, they became your great-great-great. Insert about 1 billion more greats, grandmother. Congratulations, you're descended from genetic typos. But here's the truly mind-bending part. Evolution has no plan. None. Zero. Zilch. It's not aiming for intelligence, consciousness, or the ability to understand quantum physics. It's not even aiming for better. It's just playing an endless game of what happens if we try this, with the enthusiasm of a toddler with finger paints and no adult supervision. We humans, with our delusions of grandeur, like to imagine ourselves as the inevitable result of evolutionary progress. We draw those neat little diagrams showing fish crawling out of the ocean, growing legs, standing upright, and eventually inventing smartphones. But that's about as accurate as saying that lottery numbers are chosen to specifically create millionaires. The truth is far more humbling and infinitely more absurd. You're not the goal of evolution. You're a footnote. A really interesting footnote that can contemplate its own footnote-ness, but a footnote nonetheless. Every species that ever existed thought it was the protagonist of life's story. The dinosaurs probably had their own version of philosophy, convinced they were the universe's chosen ones right up until that asteroid showed up with eviction papers. And speaking of dinosaurs, let's talk about evolution's sense of humor. These magnificent creatures ruled the planet for 165 million years. Humans have been around for maybe 300,000 years, and we've already figured out how to potentially wipe ourselves out with nuclear weapons and climate change. Who's more evolved now? Evolution is like a cosmic improvisation class where nobody read the rules, there's no instructor, and somehow everyone's just winging it. The only rule is, don't die before you reproduce. Everything else is optional. Beauty, intelligence, meaning, purpose. These are all just happy accidents, evolutionary spandrels, the biological equivalent of finding $20 in your old jacket pocket. So, if evolution is just cosmic improv, how do we explain the incredible complexity we see around us? How did random accidents create something as sophisticated as your brain, or as bewildering as reality TV? Imagine you're watching the world's most talented magician perform the ultimate illusion, making intelligence appear from pure randomness. The audience gasps, the critics applaud, and everyone demands to know the secret. The punchline? There is no magician. The trick is doing itself, and nobody, not even the universe, knows how it works. This is evolution's greatest performance, creating the breathtaking complexity of life through what essentially amounts to cosmic trial and error. It's like watching someone solve a Rubik's Cube by randomly twisting it for 4 billion years. Except the cube keeps changing shape, the colors keep changing meaning, and somehow, impossibly, patterns start to emerge. Let's talk about your eye for a moment. That miraculous orb that's currently translating reflected photons into the experience of reading these words. Creationists love to point at the eye and say, "This is too complex to be an accident." And you know what? They're absolutely right. An eye is too complex to be an accident. But they're asking the wrong question. That didn't happen by accident. It happened by 4 billion years of consecutive accidents that happened to work slightly better than the accidents that came before them. It's like asking how someone climbed Mount Everest and being told, one step at a time. Except each step took 1 million years, and most of the climbers fell off cliffs. Here's evolution's dirty little secret. It doesn't build things from scratch. It's the ultimate recycling program, taking whatever biological junk is lying around and jury-rigging it into something that might work. Your inner ear, repurposed gill slits. Your jawbone, recycled fish gills. Evolution is basically the biological equivalent of those people who turn old shipping containers into tiny homes, except with more existential implications. The process is simultaneously elegant and absolutely ridiculous. Picture this. Millions of years ago, some primitive creature had light-sensitive spots on its skin. Not eyes, just patches of cells that could tell the difference between light and dark. Useful for not swimming into rocks or inadvertently becoming something else's lunch. But then, and this is where evolution gets creative in the most chaotic way possible, random mutations started playing around with these light-sensitive patches. Some creatures developed little dents around them. Others grew protective layers. Still others accidentally wired them to more sophisticated processing units in their developing brains. None of this was planned. It was all just genetic typos that happened to be useful typos, like autocorrect. But instead of changing duck to something inappropriate, it occasionally changes light-sensitive patch to sophisticated visual system capable of reading Shakespeare. Now, here's where your existential crisis should really start kicking in. This same random, unguided process created your brain. That 3-pound mass of neurons that's desperately trying to find meaning in existence. It's the product of eons of beautiful accidents, each one building on the chaos that came before. Your consciousness, the very sense of you that's having thoughts about having thoughts, emerged from the same process that gave peacocks their ridiculous tail feathers and gave ducks their duck nests. There's no fundamental difference between the evolutionary pressure that created your ability to contemplate the universe and the pressure that created a penguin's ability to slide on its belly. But here's the really twisted part. Evolution accidentally created brains sophisticated enough to figure out that they're accidents. It's like a computer program that spontaneously develops the ability to analyze its own code and realizes it was written by a random number generator, having a nervous breakdown. We're the universe's most successful mistake, wandering around asking, what's the point? While being the living proof that there might not be one. It's the ultimate cosmic joke. Evolution accidentally created comedians capable of recognizing the punchline. And the punchline keeps getting better. Your brain, in all its accidental glory, spends enormous amounts of energy trying to find patterns, purpose, and meaning in everything. It can't help itself. It's like a meaning detection machine stuck on overdrive, finding faces in clouds and conspiracies and coincidences. But what if the biggest pattern it's missing is that there might not be a pattern at all? Evolution created brains that are absolutely terrible at understanding evolution. We're biased toward thinking in terms of purpose and design, because brains that looked for intentions and patterns were more likely to survive than brains that just shrugged at everything. If you hear rustling in the bushes, it's better to assume it's a predator and be wrong, than to assume it's nothing and become lunch. So here we are, the products of billions of years of trial and error, equipped with pattern-seeking brains that desperately want to believe we're special, meaningful, and destined for greatness. Meanwhile, evolution just keeps doing its thing, throwing genetic dice and seeing what happens, completely indifferent to our need for cosmic significance. The magnificent complexity you see in nature, the intricate dance of ecosystems, the perfect mathematical spirals of nautilus shells, the impossibly precise timing of seasonal migrations. It's all just emergence. Simple rules, repeated over astronomical periods of time, accidentally creating complexity that makes our greatest achievements look like finger paintings. But if we're just accidents stumbling through an unguided process, why does it feel like there's so much more to the story? Why do we fall in love, create art, and stay up late wondering about our place in the cosmos? Here's the most beautiful, terrifying truth about your existence. Everything you think you want, you don't actually want. Everything you think you feel, you don't actually feel. Everything you think you are, you're not actually that either. You're a biological puppet dancing to chemical music written by evolutionary composers who died billions of years ago. And the symphony is called Stay Alive Long Enough to Make More Puppets. Sound harsh? Let's start with something simple. Why do you think sunsets are beautiful? Right now, your brain is probably generating some poetic response about the majesty of nature, the peaceful transition from day to night, or the romantic symbolism of endings and beginnings. That's adorable. Really, your brain is like a very talented PR department working overtime to make everything seem meaningful and intentional. But here's what's actually happening. Your visual system is responding to specific wavelengths of light that, millions of years ago, indicated safe navigation conditions for your ancestors. The beauty you experience is just your ancient GPS system saying, good lighting for not falling off cliffs or walking into predators. Romance is just really sophisticated cave person technology. Love, all love. That transcendent emotion that makes poets weep and causes people to do spectacularly irrational things like sharing their Netflix passwords. We've built entire civilizations around the idea that love is the ultimate human experience, proof that we're more than just biological machines grinding through existence. Plot twist. Love is evolution's most successful marketing campaign. Think about it. Evolution needs you to reproduce, but reproduction requires an enormous investment of time, energy, and resources. If you approach dating with pure rational analysis, you'd probably decide that raising offspring is a terrible deal. So evolution developed the ultimate incentive program. It makes reproduction feel like the most important, meaningful, transcendent thing you could possibly do. That overwhelming feeling when you look into someone's eyes and think, this is it. This is the person I want to build a life with. That's your brain getting absolutely flooded with chemicals designed to make you ignore the fact that you're about to sign up for 20 years of sleep deprivation, financial stress, and worry that would make an air traffic controller nervous. But here's the really twisted part. It works so well that even when you know what's happening, it still feels real. It's like knowing exactly how a magic trick works and still being amazed when a rabbit appears. Your rational mind can understand that love is neurochemical manipulation, but your emotional brain is sitting there going, yeah, but doesn't it feel amazing? This extends to everything. That sense of purpose you feel when you help others. Evolution's way of ensuring group cooperation, which improves survival odds. The satisfaction you get from achieving goals. Your reward system motivating you to engage in behaviors that historically led to better resource acquisition. The existential dread that keeps you up at night. Your brain's way of making sure you're constantly evaluating and improving your survival strategies. Even this conversation, this very moment where you're contemplating the nature of your own existence, is probably just your brain engaging in social bonding behavior. Humans who could engage in complex abstract discussions were more likely to form alliances, share resources, and work together on problems. Philosophy might just be really advanced small talk. Your personality, your preferences, your deepest held beliefs. They're all just evolutionary algorithms running on biological hardware. You like sweet foods because your ancestors needed quick energy. You're attracted to certain body types because they signaled good health and reproductive potential. You enjoy stories because pattern recognition and social modeling improve survival odds. That career you're passionate about, those hobbies that define your identity, the music that moves your soul, all of it can be traced back to ancient survival advantages that have nothing to do with your individual desires or aspirations. You're not choosing these things. They're choosing you, based on programs written in your DNA by eons of trial and error. But wait, it gets worse, or better, depending on your tolerance for existential vertigo. Your consciousness, that inner narrator that's currently having thoughts about having thoughts, might be the most elaborate illusion of all. What you experience as you is probably just a collection of mental processes that evolution bundled together because it was useful to have a centralized monitoring system. Think about it. If you're a complex biological system navigating a dangerous world, it helps to have some kind of executive function keeping track of what's going on. But evolution, being the practical joker it is, didn't just create a monitoring system. It created a monitoring system that thinks it's in charge, has opinions about everything, and believes it's the most important thing in the universe. Your sense of self might be the biological equivalent of a middle manager who thinks they're the CEO. You experience yourself as the decision maker, the experiencer, the one in control. But neuroscience suggests that most of your decisions are made before you are even aware of them. Your consciousness might just be getting the meeting notes after all the important decisions have been made. And yet, here's the beautiful paradox that should either comfort you or drive you completely insane. None of this makes your experiences less real or less meaningful. The fact that love is neurochemical manipulation doesn't make it less powerful. The fact that beauty is evolutionary programming doesn't make sunsets less gorgeous. The fact that consciousness might be an illusion doesn't make your thoughts and feelings less important to you. Evolution accidentally created beings capable of transcending their programming, at least partially. We can recognize the biological basis of our experiences and still choose to find them meaningful. We can understand that our brains are meaning-making machines and decide that the meanings we make matter anyway. This might be the ultimate plot twist. Evolution created creatures capable of rewriting their own code. We can't escape our biological heritage, but we can acknowledge it, work with it, and occasionally transcend it. We're the first species that we know of that can look at evolution and say, "Thanks for getting us this far, but we'll take it from here." Your genes want you to survive and reproduce, but you can choose to write poetry, explore space, dedicate your life to abstract mathematics, or spend your weekend helping strangers for no evolutionary advantage whatsoever. You can choose meaning over survival, love over logic, art over advantage. The puppet can see its strings, and that changes everything. But if we can transcend our programming, what does that mean for our future? Where is this beautiful, chaotic, accidental process taking us next? Congratulations, humanity. We just broke evolution, not destroyed it. Mind you, that would be impressive in a catastrophically stupid way. No, we've done something far more interesting and potentially terrifying. We've made evolution self-aware. For the first time in 4 billion years, the process of natural selection is being observed, understood, and increasingly manipulated by one of its own products. It's like a novel becoming aware that it's being written and deciding to help with the editing. Right now, as you're reading this, we're living through the most significant transition in the history of life on Earth. We're the bridge between blind, random evolution and conscious, directed evolution. We're witnessing, no, we're participating in evolution's transition from unconscious process to self-directed system. Think about what this means. Every species that ever lived was subject to environmental pressures completely beyond their control. Climate changes? Too bad. Adapt or die. Asteroid impact? Sorry, extinction lottery time. Genetic diseases? Deal with it or don't reproduce. For billions of years, evolution was something that happened to life, not something life could actively participate in shaping. But humans? We looked at evolution and said, "Hold my beer, I've got some ideas." We started with simple things. Selective breeding of crops and livestock, basically playing evolution's role as the environmental pressure that decides which traits get passed on. We turned wolves into chihuahuas and wild grasses into wheat. We became evolution's consultants, and we were surprisingly good at the job. Then we got bolder. Medicine let us survive conditions that would have been evolutionary dead ends. Eyeglasses meant that poor vision wasn't a survival disadvantage. Vaccines tricked our immune systems into being prepared for diseases we'd never encountered. We weren't just adapting to our environment anymore. We were adapting our environment to us. But the real paradigm shift happened when we started reading the code itself. DNA sequencing, genetic engineering, CRISPR. We went from being evolution's products to being evolution's programmers. We can now edit genes with the precision of a word processor, adding features and debugging problems that took millions of years to develop. This is absolutely unprecedented. Imagine if rocks suddenly developed the ability to understand and manipulate geology. That's essentially what happened when humans figured out genetics. We're the first iteration of evolution that can consciously direct its own next iterations. And oh boy, are we directing it in some weird directions. We're creating glow-in-the-dark cats because apparently that was important, engineering bacteria to produce insulin, and seriously discussing the possibility of making humans resistant to radiation for space travel. We're essentially turning evolution into a choose-your-own-adventure book where we're both the reader and the author. But here's where it gets philosophically delicious. What happens to natural selection when the selecting isn't natural anymore? Traditional evolution worked through environmental pressures, drought, predators, disease, climate change. These pressures were impersonal, unbiased, and completely indifferent to what any particular species wanted or needed. Evolution wasn't trying to make better organisms. It was just eliminating worse ones. Human-directed evolution is the opposite. We're making conscious choices about which traits to preserve, enhance, or eliminate. We're introducing values, preferences, and goals into a process that previously had none. We're not just evolving anymore. We're curating our evolution. This raises some mind-bending questions. If we can eliminate genetic diseases, should we? If we can enhance intelligence, should we? If we can extend human lifespan indefinitely, should we? And who gets to decide what constitutes an improvement to the human species? We're essentially becoming evolution's quality control department, but we're making up the quality standards as we go along. And unlike natural selection, which tested everything through millions of years of trial and error, we're making these decisions with a few decades of experience and a lot of very educated guessing. The really wild part is that we're not just directing our own evolution, we're starting to direct evolution in general. We're de-extincting species, creating new ones, and redesigning ecosystems. We've gone from being passengers on evolution's ship to being the captain, crew, and navigation system all at once. But perhaps the most profound change is happening in how we understand ourselves. Once you realize that consciousness, intelligence, and self-awareness are products of evolution, you start asking different questions. If evolution produced intelligence once, can we make it do it again, but better? If consciousness emerged from complexity, what happens when we create systems more complex than brains? We might be witnessing the birth of Evolution 2.0, a version that's faster, more directed, and capable of producing changes that would take natural selection millions of years to achieve. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and biotechnology aren't just tools we're using. They're the next phase of evolutionary development. The really beautiful, terrifying possibility is that we might not be evolution's final product. We might be evolution's way of figuring out how to evolve more efficiently. We could be the bridge between biological evolution and something else entirely. Technological evolution, digital consciousness, or forms of intelligence we can't even imagine yet. Evolution spent 4 billion years creating us. What will we create in the next 4 billion? So where does this leave us? The self-aware accidents contemplating our own existence while actively rewriting the rules that created us. Here we are, at the end of our journey through the funhouse mirror of existence. And if you're feeling a bit dizzy, that's completely normal. You've just discovered that you're a cosmic accident that became self-aware, figured out it was an accident, and decided to take control of the accident-making process. If that doesn't qualify as the universe's greatest plot twist, nothing does. The beautiful paradox of human existence is that we're simultaneously completely meaningless and absolutely significant. We're random biological events that happen to develop the capacity for meaning-making. We're the universe's way of experiencing itself, understanding itself, and occasionally laughing at itself. You started this journey as a human being. You're ending it as a conscious piece of evolution that can choose its own direction. You're not just a product of natural selection. You're natural selection becoming aware of itself and deciding what to do next. The cosmic joke isn't on us. We are the cosmic joke. And the punchline is that we get to write the rest of the material. Evolution gave us brains capable of transcending evolution. That's either the most hilarious irony in the universe or the most profound gift imaginable. Probably both. So what do you do with this knowledge? You could spiral into existential paralysis, or you could recognize that being a beautiful accident in an accidental universe is actually pretty amazing. You get to decide what your existence means, how to use your accidentally evolved consciousness, and what kind of future to create for the accident-prone species you belong to. The universe may be indifferent, but you don't have to be. Evolution may be random, but your choices don't have to be. Welcome to the next phase of the greatest story ever told. Now, what are you going to do with it? And hey, if this wild ride through existential vertigo made you think, laugh, or question everything you thought you knew about life, maybe share it with someone else who could use a good cosmic perspective check. After all, we're all in this beautiful accident together.